This is the dorsal image. It's his back. You have his head, shoulders, buttocks, legs. His feet are at the bottom. All the white on the image itself is blood. The frontal image likewise. All of the white is blood. It is not a photograph of blood. It is blood. Proven in the laboratory 12 different ways. 2 of them are acceptable in any court of law in any nation in the world today to prove the presence of blood in an object. The man in the shroud took in excess of 120 strokes of a 3-thorned Roman flagrum. A flagrum, a short leather whip, lashes about this long. 3 of them, 2 balls of lead on the end of each lash. They were either sharpened or they had spikes in them. Meat was ripped out of his body with every flick of the lash. He was scourged nude, bent over double and tied to either a ring in the floor or a short post, so that his back was like a tabletop. They could do what they wanted to do to him. He was scourged by 2 men standing on opposite sides. The man on the right was a little bit bigger than the man on the left, and a lot more sadistic. He enjoyed his work. He overlapped his strokes. He curved them around to get the front of the body. There isn't an inch of his body, front to back, and we can see every inch with X-ray fluorescence, that does not bear scourge marks. They picked the most sensitive areas to cut him to shreds. The only place they missed is the pericardium, the area immediately above the heart. The doctors say if he had taken that kind of a beating over the heart, he would have died under the lash, which means that this one had to have been done by experts. They were pros. It was not the first time that they had ever brought a man to a second or 2 before death and then stopped. They knew how to make it hurt the most and last the longest. When one more stroke of the lash would undoubtedly have killed him, the beating stopped. The man in the shroud wore a cap of thorns. Not a circlet, the way we've always envisaged Jesus wearing, but what appears to have been a complete cap. His entire head is covered with puncture wounds, made by a small, extremely sharp and pointed object, such the thorn. To me, it makes a great deal more sense. I find it very difficult to imagine anybody that would give a man a beating like that, taking time out like a preschooler to make a daisy chain. For me, at least, it's a great deal easier to imagine someone getting a sadistic idea. He says he's a king. He needs a crown. Grabbing his sword, running out the back of the Fortress Antonia, cutting off a thorn bush. Eastern thorns, of course, are that long. Possibly grabbing a handful from the fire, quickly twisting him into a knot or a ball, maybe tying a rope around it, jamming it down to his eyebrows. Something like that was done to him. The man in the shroud carried a heavy object tied on his shoulders after the beating, something that weighed between 70 and 100 pounds. He has no flesh left on his shoulder blades. The wounds have been rubbed together. The flesh is chafed off. Undoubtedly, this would be the cross piece of the cross. Contrary to paintings and sculpture, such as the Way of the Cross, there really is no record that the Romans ever made anyone drag the entire thing. At least normally, if there is such a word, they would tie the cross piece on in the position of crucifixion. Then they would march the victim through the streets to the site of the execution, always taking the longest possible route, wandering up one street and down the next one. The entire idea was to deter future crime, to keep you from doing whatever it was this poor devil did. They wanted the greatest number of people possible to see him dying. The records say that they would have a leash around his ankle, a strip of leather like a dog, to keep them from running away. They also say it was considered fun to pull their legs out from under them with their arms tied in this position. The man in the shroud has the end of his nose gone, with dirt ground into it from a bad fall. He has no skin left on his left knee, with dirt in it. He took at least 2 major falls. Someone worked him over rather badly. He was belted in the face more than once. He's got a shiner that's a real beauty. He appears to have a broken nose, but he has no broken bones. The nose is cartilage. There appears to be a separation in the cartilage. It's almost as if someone might possibly have taken a club and hit him sideways across the face. Someone grabbed his beard and ripped it out. His beard was plucked. They had a great deal of fun with him. This is not a photograph. It was done with a computer. Neither is it color accurate. It isn't intended to be. The idea was to determine how much blood was visible in his face. Using the big computer, they've subtracted everything in the face except the blood. There is nothing visible in this picture except blood. They certainly didn't leave very much of him, did they? To me, if nobody else, that's Isaiah 53. He was mutilated beyond that of any other man. At the very least, this is undoubtedly what you would have seen if you'd seen him hanging on the cross. The man in the shroud was crucified. Once again, not the way we've always imagined Jesus being crucified, through the palm, but through the wrist. Probably the simplest thing I've ever known of anyone to do in shroud-related work. Someone obtained a cadaver, the body of a man. They took his arm off at the shoulder and nailed it to the wall with a 10-penny nail through the palm, then sat and watched it for a couple of hours. In something less than 2 hours, the bones in the palm separated, the nail ripped through, the arm fell. Simple conclusion, a nail through the palm will not support the dead weight of a man's arm, let alone a body in the throes of death agony. But we have a small space in our wrist, just below the heel of the hand. Ironically, the size of a square-cut nail. A couple of these little toys driven through there will hold any amount of weight. If you've never seen one before, it's a crucifixion nail. Cute, aren't they? A pair of them driven through the wrist will hold anything. It does not conflict with Scripture. I realize that depending on which translation of the Bible you might own, the Gospel of John uses the word hand, a palm, for the point through which a nail was driven through Christ's body. But the Greeks have got at least 3 words for everything. It was a native-born Greek pastor that said this. I took this to Pastor Zekas. If this were the 1st century, he'd be a bishop. He's in his mid-80s. He's still servicing 9 churches on foot and with a donkey. He's got scars on his body to prove what he believes. He's been stoned for his faith more than once. He laughed at me. He said, Paul, you Yankees are all alike. You're just never going to get it through your thick, stupid Yankee heads that we Greeks have got 3 words for everything. And he's right. If any of you are Greek, I've got to ask you forgiveness in advance. I know what my pronunciation is. I've had Greeks scream in agony when they heard me try, but it's the best I can do. There's the word pamera, which covers this part of the body. It was not used in the New Testament. The word that was used is chir, C-H-I-E-R. It covers this part of your body. You can translate it finger, palm, wrist, forearm, elbow. Take your choice. About 400 years before Christ, at the command of Caesar, 70 rabbis were ordered from Jerusalem down to Alexandria to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek. You can still purchase that book. There's probably a copy in the pastor's library. The Greek translation of the Hebrew Scripture. The word chir, same word, used many times. Somewhere in Chronicles, one of the kings wore a ring on his. It refers to the joints of the chir. And in Genesis 24, Eliezer, Abraham's servant, was ordered north into Syria to purchase a wife for Isaac. He gave Rebekah gold bangles, bracelets. She put them on her chir. Where do you girls wear your bracelets? It's identically the same word. Our only problem was that until 1979, we did not know how to crucify anyone. Everything that we've ever taught or been taught on the subject has been based on the imagination of writers and artists over the centuries who've tried to put a story together with virtually no information. You see, Constantine outlawed crucifixion in the year 315. There hasn't been a recorded one since. We simply forgot how to crucify someone. Maybe we should forget it again? And then again, maybe it's doggone near time the church found out what a crucifixion is? You're never going to forget it. We throw the word around awfully loosely once or twice a year. We get maudlin about it. We sing about it. You know, the old rugged cross? And nobody had the faintest idea of how to do one. We had to learn. One of the doctors, older than I am, had himself crucified. Not one of those freaky things that you read about occasionally in the spring. He was tied on a cross. It was done under supervision. He was jacked up so that he could find out firsthand as a medical doctor what would happen to his own organs. He couldn't think of any other way to do it. He only lasted for seconds. They had to put an axe to it and take him down. The other one used skeletons. Today we could crucify someone and make it work. The only place that would work is the wrist. It does not conflict with the original language. And I'm assuming that most of you know, but I'll say it anyway, that the New Testament was originally written in Greek. There has always been an international language. Today it's American. If you can go anywhere in the world you wish today, and if you speak our brand of English, American East, you're not going to have a problem. It's a mandatory subject in Europe from the 4th grade up. The kids in the 7th and 8th grade speak more proper English really than we do. It's the language of business and culture. All the airlines operate in American once they're in the air. In the 1st century, that international language was Greek. Anyone with any kind of an education at all spoke it. Apparently, the writers of the New Testament intended that their work could be read in every language, in every nation in the known world. They wrote their letters and their work in the international language. Our problem is merely to interpret it, or to translate it. This does not conflict with the Greek.